ICQ Podcast episode 434, Ham Radio Friedrichshafen 2024. Well, hello everybody and welcome to this episode 434 of your ICQ Amateur Ham Radio podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Ed DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest Amateur Ham Radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a report from Ed DD5 Lima Papa from the Ham Radio Friedrichshafen show taking place there in southern Germany. Well, as always, it's your very kind generosity that keeps your ICQ podcast show advert free. July is our birthday month, so we do ask you to visit icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I say, send your well wishes to your podcast show and your support and your value you receive. And we really would appreciate you doing that for us. So go to icqpodcast.com/donate, where there's a new donation button there, making it very easy for you to make a donation to match the value you find. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Dan, Caryn, Edmund and Ed to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest Amateur Ham Radio news, including UK Licensed Director Full and Ham Stop Youth Violence. As always, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the News Roundtable for ICQ Podcast 434. The numbers keep racking up quite quickly, but it surprises me at times. But here we go again. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Martin. And you're right. I mean, it just seems like yesterday we recorded number 400.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And that would have been over a year ago now, because we do 26 a year, so yeah, that's gone pretty quick that last year. Also, your side the pond, we have Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT. Hi, Caryn.
Hello, Martin, and I wish everyone a happy 434.
Yeah, 434 is all the way. Back to my side of the world, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Ed.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, good to have you on. And as I say, hopefully the weather's been better on the south coast than it is where I am. This is probably another story. And last but not least, over there in Germany, where I'm not sure it'll either be mega hot or mega cold, Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Well, we've had a Melbourne day today. If you know the expression Melbourne Day, 4 seasons in one day. I'll touch a bit on that on the comments at the end, but yeah, really mixed weather at the moment. Nice to be here and nice to be back on the show and talking to everybody.
Yeah, good to have you all in tonight, and I'm sure we're going to have fun. So let's look at what's happening here. The RSGB have just issued the first full syllabus 2.0 for people who want to go directly straight to the full license. Now, I always feel a bit guilty about this, and probably you will as well, Ed. Well, we went straight to full license because that was always available at the time. And I'm a big opponent of the fact that the 3-tier license system's great. But I do accept some people can do it in one go. Over to you first, Ed. What do you think?
Well, a little bit of a correction. I went to a Class B license directly because I could not manage to get the Morse test right. So in my day, yes, it was one license to cover all regulations and the technology side of things. But then the second part of the license, if you like, to get a Class A license was the Morse code test. I think it's 12 words a minute, which I couldn't manage. So I was happily licensed in the UK for several years, just on VHF and up. The idea of a direct to full licensed syllabus, I think, was brought in because a lot of people coming from industry from the electronics industry, from IT industry, they had most of the knowledge they needed for the full license, and it just basically is more efficient if they could sit one test instead of three. And having both options, I think, is a very good idea. But of course, it needs maintenance and all the rest of it. But I think the RSGB can manage that. Yeah, so having the option, you can either go the 3-tier way, or you can go direct to the full license. And I think that's a good idea. They've brought out an updated syllabus. Of course, they have to from time to time. And yeah, I've got no problems with that. And good luck to the people who it suits more than doing the separate levels. Some people may only be interested in the lower power, little bit more limited frequency allocation of the foundation. Other people, the intermediate suits, and other people, the full is what they aim for. So having the option to go direct to full or through the steps, I think it's fantastic. And I think it's the only country, is the UK, that do that. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And like yourself, I didn't do Morse. I had a B license, but don't put yourself down. We both sat the full examination, the technical examination. And I remember lots of the questions I had to answer were HF questions, and some were about Morse. But I never did Morse, and originally, like you, I was a B licensee, and I had operating abilities above 30 megahertz, which I thoroughly enjoyed, quite honestly. I was always going to be a VHF, UHF person. But we did the whole examination. Edmund, what do you think about going straight to full license?
Well, back when I passed my foundation license in 2009, this option wasn't available. And, okay, you can only pass the exams that are put in front of you at any given time. But I think there's something to be said for passing the foundation license or equivalent and then going on air and having hands-on experience, and then after a while upgrading to the intermediate and playing around with that, and then after a while upgrading to the full license. I may have told this story before on the podcast, so apologies if this is a repeat for some listeners, but something that's always stuck in my mind is that about 5, 6, 7 years ago now, I was down at Shoreham Lighthouse for the International Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend on the third weekend in August. Put the date in your diary. And we were visited by a member of the public who wasn't a radio amateur, but who had recently retired after a very long career in the electronics, radio communications equipment design and building industry. And his knowledge, would absolutely wipe the floor with anything that I knew in that subject. He was the kind of guy that if you asked him, I don't know, to design a shortwave broadcast receiver, he could, knock it up, the schematic on a bit of paper before he had barely got out of bed and had breakfast. You know the kind of person I mean, which was great, except that we were tuning around 20 meters at the time, and there were 2 lighthouses that were on exactly the same frequency. One of them was on the west coast of Scotland. The other one was on the east coast of Scotland. You could probably have driven from one site to the other in very short order. Less than an hour probably if the roads were empty and you put your foot down. So geographically, these 2 lighthouses were not that far apart. And despite multiple efforts to explain to this guy the reason why we could hear both of them on the south coast of England at 5.9 plus, but they couldn't hear each other despite just being a few tens of miles away down the road, We tried different ways of explaining it. We drew diagrams. We tried to explain it in the most simple and simplistic language that we could imagine. And even after about 10, 15 minutes, he just could not get his head round it. And yet, as I say, he could design circuits before breakfast, almost without thinking about it. So I can see why there's a temptation for people with that kind of background to want to go down the direct to full route. And I'm not knocking anybody who wants to do that at all. But I think there is a lot to be said for the 3-tier system, and in between the licenses, going on the air, experimenting, finding things out, making mistakes, and learning that way. And last but not least, even if you convince yourself today that all you want to do is play around on VHF and UHF, nothing wrong with that, and you convince yourself that a foundation or technician or equivalent license will give you everything that you need or will ever want, it's still worthwhile upgrading as time goes by, because it may well be that in a few years' time, in a way that you can't even imagine today, something will happen, or you will experience something, or you'll be invited to do something, and you'll suddenly realize that the extra privileges that you get with the higher license levels are going to be really valuable to you in a way that you can't imagine today. And taking me as an example, my main reason for upgrading to the full license was so that I could transmit on the 60 meter band in the UK and operate in France under the CEPT arrangements on the occasions that I went there on holiday. In the 10 plus years since I upgraded to the full license, I've done very little of either of those things, but the privileges I have used are being able to hold a notice of variation for special event stations and being able to hold club licenses. And yet, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I don't think the idea that I would ever do either of those things would have even crossed my mind. So it's always worth upgrading, even if you can't immediately see the benefits or why you would want to. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. I know that you went the 3-tier system because that was available to you at the time when I did ours. It was just a 1-tier licensing system, or the technical part of it anyway. I've said this a number of times, probably on this podcast as well, but every course I've taught, I've learnt something, but that's the beauty of our hobby. It's wide. You can't know it all. Caryn, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I like that there is this option, Martin. Here in the States, while we don't have exactly this, we de facto we really have. If you sit for your tech and you pass, you're given the option of taking your general, and if you pass, you're given the option of taking your extra. Is that the same thing? Well, yeah, in the end, it's pretty much the same thing. So it is a kind of a fast track. No pressure if you don't want to take it, or if you just want to stop after passing your tech, because that's all you need. Maybe you're part of an emergency response unit and they require everyone to have their tech so they can use their handy-talkie. That's fine too. So I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I think it's really an idea whose time has come. And I don't know how many other countries are doing this, but it's an awfully good idea. Really is. So I say, I would like more people to now be able to take advantage of that. I wonder how they would have handled that. I do wonder how they would have handled that if there were still a Morse requirement on top of everything. But again, that's just speculation. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems at all, Caryn. And when I sat my exams for the States, most has been done away with in the States as a licence requirement, as well as in the UK. And, all right, I was holding a full licence in the UK. Dan will probably say I was mad to do it this way, but I did all three on one Sunday morning at an RSGB convention. And I've got to say, at the end of doing all three exams in one go, my head was throbbing. But Dan, you say not many people do that.
Well, no, I not many, but a significant number do that, and I think it's perfectly fine. The only thing I would wonder about is whether or not this syllabus to go straight to the full license covers all the topics. That's the key here, right? Is that you want to test people on all the topics. So if it does, if just like here, you take all three tests, so you've covered everything in the exam pool. I think your syllabus should do the same. Having said that, I'll agree with one thing Edmund said and kind of disagree with another. So I agree with Edmund about upgrading your license, because you never know what you'll want to do in the future. Say you start out as a tech, and then here in the U.S., that gives you privileges on 10-meter sideband. Well, say you get on 10-meter sideband this summer, and the bands are great, and you start to enjoy working DX. Well, you're going to be not so. The conditions are not going to be so good in 5 years. But if you have an extra class license, you can still get on and work DX. Another thing that the extra class license gives you here in the States is you can become a volunteer examiner. You can't be a volunteer examiner with just a tech license. And even if you have a general class license, you can still only give the tech test. So that's another reason to get an extra class license. What I'm going to disagree with Edmund about, though, is the bit about experience. There's nothing to say that, so this guy's got a full license, so he's going to still make mistakes. I mean, everybody makes mistakes on the air, and I don't think it matters whether he has the foundation license and makes mistakes or has the full license and makes mistakes. So that's as long as the important thing is you learn from the mistakes, right? So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think you're right. You do learn from mistakes, and we all make them, let's be honest. And as long as we don't cause too much interference and we don't do it too often, it's a fact of life. We're not perfect.
I'm an extra class licensee, and I make mistakes all the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I probably did when I was operating in the States a couple of weeks, 4 weeks or so ago. But did my best, didn't cause any interference. And in fairness, I might hold an extra, but 90% of the time, I was operating VHF at 5 watts because that's all I had in with me at the time. I must admit, when I was with Scott in Chicago, I was running a kilowatt on HF, but that was not under supervision because Scott wasn't supervising me, but that was quite nice, but it worked well. And I even had a contact with Caryn, didn't I, Caryn?
We had a great contact. And you have a QSL card.
I do. I'm very impressed with it. Very impressed. Even though I don't do QSL cards, I was impressed. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think everybody will agree with it, but unfortunately, at least there's an option there. If somebody takes the full license and they fail it, they can always go back and do the 3-tier system and go from there. Right, move to our next news story. YOTA Camp Shack is named in memory of Bob Heil, K9EID, who's now unfortunately a silent key. And I know the event's happening at the moment, but I just think this is a nice touch that we're remembering Bob. He was a real nice guy, did a lot for amateur radio, and I just think we ought to remember the people that who go the extra mile for us in this hobby. What do you think, Caryn?
Was a wonderful gesture because this was a crushing loss for the ham radio community. Bob was so much a part of everything. Just as an aside, I have added to the show notes, I've added a YouTube link. They were able to record the dedication ceremony up in Nova Scotia, naming the shack. And if you follow the link and you watch, you will see Neil conducting this ceremony, formally naming the shack, from which the youngsters are operating a VE1 YOTA all week. They will be operating, operation ends on the 12th, so it will be over. But this will be it from now on. They will have the Bob Heil shack. How nice. How nice to be able to do something like this using much of the equipment that he provided selflessly because he could and he wanted the kids to have the best. So it was a natural. This was really a natural to do. So very, very pleased. And I can't imagine anyone would argue that this isn't a fitting way for Bob's legacy to go forward. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah. Let's say, I think we ought to remember Bob. I will for years, fondly, of the time he gave me. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is certainly a great gesture. Bob, as everyone said, Bob was just a great guy, and I probably almost couldn't think of a better way to honor him.
Yeah, it's a good one. Edmund, thoughts on this one?
Well, I didn't know previously that Bob Heil had been so supportive of youth initiatives and things like that, but I'm not surprised in the least. And it's a good way to ensure that his name lives on. Not that I think there was much danger of his name not living on, but as the years and decades go by, and maybe some people start to forget who Bob was, or maybe people come into the hobby in many years' time when his name isn't mentioned quite so regularly anymore, then this is a good way of making sure that his name and his legacy lives on and doesn't get forgotten and doesn't fade into history, Martin. So yes, it's good news.
Yeah, I think so. Ed, last words on this one?
Yeah, I think it underlines how much internationally Bob Heil was respected, given this is Canada that's getting this shack that's named after him. It would be nice to see something happening in the US as well. Okay, I know the YOTA is the Americas, North and South America, but I still think somewhere, from where Heil Sound is or something, I don't know, local club there, or the AM group, because he always had lots to do with the AM modulation, could perhaps do something to remember him there as well. But yeah, I mean, my communications with Bob were very, very sparse, but every time he was helpful. And yeah, he's a great loss, of course. And it's nice that Neil and the guys in the YOTA organisation can do this. And it just underlines how internationally well-known Bob was as well. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that one, and that's good news. Right, moving on to our next news story. We often talk about space junk, but this is a massive piece of space junk when it comes back. SpaceX have been awarded a contract to deorbit the ISS, and I believe this is going to happen in 2030. That doesn't seem that far away, quite honestly. I'm going to say, Dan, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think it's great that they're going to do this in a controlled manner. And as we were talking before, and this thought didn't occur to me until we were talking about this before, is that it's going to be a big loss to ham radio, losing the repeater equipment up there. And I wonder what they're going to be doing about International Space Station contacts. It's those were great things for ham radio, and that'll be a big loss.
Certainly will, along with things like APRS and the International Space Station acts as a flying repeater as well. So there's a lot of things amateur radio-wise happen up there. Caryn, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think what's going to happen is there will be amateur radio on many of the successor spacecraft out there. So it's very possible we will be trading one space station and the ARRL program for several. And there will be a greater choice. They might not be as much of a team, an international team, as we have seen with this group. But I don't think we're going to lose amateur radio up there. In fact, we may have more choices. The shame if it is seeing a sunset on what is the ARRL program. What a wonderful program this has been. What a window into opportunity for young kids, really young school kids, for much older university students. The program has touched so many communities deeply and changed the lives of some kids. It's just been an amazing thing. And the people who accidentally, imagine that, accidentally had a QSO with an astronaut. How many stories we've had about that. But I don't think we're going to be left empty-handed. Just as the early space program with amateur radio ended when the space station came online, I think there might be better things to come. So let's watch and wait. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, all we can do is watch and wait and hope, I suspect, Caryn. Moving to, let's say, Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a shame. It's also a shame the process that they're going to use to bring this down to Earth. They're still going to ditch it into the Pacific. Now, that's the plan, apparently. It would have been nice to find, considering that SpaceX have the capability of bringing their booster rockets back down and landing them and reusing them, it would be nice if they'd actually been able to find some way to effectively cut the ISS into pieces and bring each piece down and not just fire it into the atmosphere and target it at landing into the ocean. We don't really want to drop stuff into the ocean like that. The other alternative, of course, would be very much more expensive, and then who would pay for it, considering the ISS is probably 60% US built, and then you've got a big chunk of it built by the European Space Agency and a big chunk of it built by Roscosmos from Russia. So, the international nature of it, it's going to be a shame, because the article that they're talking about a possible replacement to be built by private industry sounds at the moment as if it's only going to be US. So it's basically going to be Skylab 2, which was Skylab was the predecessor to the ISS, which is a shame. The international nature of the ISS, irrespective of the politics on the planet, there was multiple nations working there in space research and on board the ISS. And if it becomes, the American space station and then the European put ours up, and then India's also planning one, I believe, and China's already got one up there, it's going away from the international nature of space to being each country doing their own thing again, which I think is a backwards step. In this case, yes, they're going to bring it down, I presume in pieces, controlled burn up or a controlled pass through of the atmosphere and then dump it into the ocean. As I said, it would be nice if they could bring it down in pieces and give the pieces to various museums. Anyway, that's not to be. And again, the article I've linked to in our show notes, it sounds, from the way it's written, that they're taking, the US government are taking bids, or NASA's now taking bids from private companies to put up a replacement space station. However, I don't think that's going to be there by 2030 to take over, so there will be a gap between the ISS going and whatever the next space station is getting there, which is a shame. However, I do believe the space station that's going to go and orbit around the moon is also going to have amateur radio on it. So, we're losing one area, we're gaining another. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, it's interesting to keep an eye on these sort of things, and hopefully, as you say, we will remain amateur radio on most of the devices that go up. So that'll be a good one. Edmund, last thoughts on this one?
Well, those 6 years between now and 2030 will go quick, because it doesn't feel that long ago that I was listening periodically to reports on the local BBC radio station about the times after dark that I could go outside and look up at the sky and see the Mir space station going over. But I suppose that must have been the 1990s. So, yes, it's a shame that the space station can't stay up there a bit longer. I've got several frequencies programmed in my trusty Uniden Bearcat scanner that I often have rolling round in the background. 145.8 for the slow scan TV and astronaut school contacts. 145.825 for the APRS downlink. 437.800 for the crossband repeater downlink. And even ye oldie 143.625 as well for communications in Russian back to Moscow. And it's quite surprising, seeing as the space station only goes over once every 90 minutes or so, is it? Something like that. It's quite surprising how often the frequencies that I've just mentioned will burst into life, more often than you might expect. So when it goes, I'll certainly miss it for sure. And I just hope that whatever ends up replacing it will also have amateur radio capability. And hopefully, I don't know if it will be possible, but hopefully all the amateur gear that's on the ISS at the moment will be able to be removed and brought back to Earth before the whole lot crashes down into the water. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. My only concern is that to bring down a £300 transmitter, a mobile transmitter, it's probably going to cost more than buying a new one. But I don't want to be the arbiter of doom on that. I hate to see things thrown away if they're working. Right, moving to our next news story. The National Traffic System. There's performance analytic tool now in development to see how well it works. Now, I'm going to go to Dan again first on this one, because Dan's probably the more knowledgeable out of the one, and obviously a lot more vocal on this subject than me. So go on, Dan, tell us about it.
Well, so for people that don't know, the National Traffic System was, one of the reasons the ARRL got started in the first place. It's called the American Radio Relay League, not Amateur Radio whatever league. And the whole idea was to organize to relay messages around the country from station to station. And this was in the days before we're able to communicate over long distances. So the National Traffic System has been around a long time, but with all the advances we've had in telecommunications over the last 20 or 30 years, some people question the relevance of the National Traffic System. I don't know how many people have gotten messages, but the kind of traffic that's being sent over the National Traffic System is just really like, happy birthday, and there's nothing really of any import. So that being the case, somebody might question the amount of work being put into this tools, these tools that are going to supposedly determine how efficient the national traffic system is. Having said that, there are people out there who think that it is a valuable thing and certainly worth keeping going, just because in case we have the cataclysmic event where our telecommunications infrastructure is totally out of whack, then we have supposedly the national traffic system to fall back on. But I'm not sure I'm in that camp, to be honest. And even more over and above that, there's actually another group called Radio Relay International that was formed, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And they were the reason they have the exact same reason for being as the national traffic system. They train their members on traffic handling and all that. And so we even have a redundant national traffic system in a manner of speaking. So anyway, just to sort of summarize here, it's good that they're developing these tools to figure out how efficient they are. But even if they got a lot more efficient, I'm not so sure that it matters.
Yeah, and we did wonder whether it pulls the whole system into, is it worth it doing any more on it? But there you go. Caryn, what's your thoughts?
Well, I have had very, very limited experience and exposure to the NTS. I believe in my first year as an amateur, which would have been right after I got my license in 2014, at one point during the year, I got a radiogram, which I still have somewhere because I just thought it was a rather old-fashioned and very neat thing. Reminded me of a telegram, for those of you out there who remember telegrams. I thought it was very cool. So of course I kept it, and I'm sure I have it filed away somewhere. But in this day and age, yes, I know there are systems that would fail. Communication systems would definitely not survive an apocalypse. Don't know that this would be the answer, though. You have people using WinLink for email, and you have other methods. So NTS, I don't want to sound the death knell for it, because I don't want to condemn something that I'm not that terribly familiar with. But based on what it is supposed to do, honestly, I think there might be better ways to accomplish it. So remains to be seen, but they're working on this. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt and see what they come up with. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, as you say, it's a strange one. I have an open mind on this of whether they're just doing this as an academic exercise or it is really worth it. But I'm going to keep an open mind. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
To be honest, this whole news story, Martin, went completely over my head. It's not something I know about, and there's nothing I can add, really. So can I duck out on this one, please?
Of course you can. No problems at all. Ed, what's your thoughts, last thoughts on this one?
Again, it's a US story. We don't have anything similar to this in Europe, as far as I know. And interestingly enough, Dan's posted a link to the Radio Relay International as an alternative, although they actually also refer to the National Traffic System. So it seems to be a complementary rather than a competing service. Whether any of this, and they talk about in emergency, they switch to an emergency configuration to expedite flow of welfare, priority and emergency traffic. So very much linked to emergency communications as well. So I think the national traffic system as it was when it was formed, I don't know, 100 years ago, maybe 80 years ago, whatever. I think what they have now is somewhat different, but I honestly don't know enough about it to comment on it because it's a US or a US and Canada only system, I believe. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, no problems. Well, we have had quite a few US stories over the last few months, basically because there doesn't seem to be a lot else happening certainly in the UK, and Europe seems to be a bit quiet as well on things. But our last news story, I'm going to get Caryn to go first because Caryn fed this one in to me. But Ham's intervene in youth-on-youth violence in India. Caryn, do you want to elaborate on this one?
Yes, certainly, Martin. I want to use the word intervene advisedly. They were observers. They did not get involved in any way other than as passersby. They did not act to interrupt or get involved, but they were indeed passersby. They just happened to be there when a group of youths began attacking another youth. Apparently, that whole region is having, according to the media reports there, which can be a little sketchy at times, a bit of a crime wave of this sort with youth on youth violence. And so observing what was going on, these passersby took pictures with their smartphone, which a lot of people will do. That happens all around the world. But these particular passersby were shortwave radio operators studying for their ham radio license, and so they had the benefit of being part of a club, the West Bengal Radio Club, who our listeners have heard about from time to time. This is a highly, highly networked club, and they use their ham radio contacts basically to transmit these images and to find out the identity of the victim and at the same time alert local authorities. So this is not really a story about radio per se and using radio per se, but using the tools that ham radio provides you as an effective communicator to be of assistance to the public. Again, keeping in mind one's own safety and not taking the law into one's own hands. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, and we spoke very quickly, and I'm not going to give the whole story away because I don't want to embarrass the guy. I think he's a podcast listener anyway. But many moons ago, I parked up round the corner from my house, and my truck got stolen. And when I reported it to the police, they said it'll be at least 4.5 hours before we come out and take your statement. And I sat on the side of the road, and 10 minutes later, the police car turned up. And out stepped a gentleman I happened to recognise as a radio amateur. And he was a policeman as well. And he said, Martin, he said, your name came up. I said, I know that name. I checked my phone. It was the same phone number. So you got bumped to the top of the queue. And I think this is sometimes this information, it's not what you know, it's who you know, to get that things sometimes happen a lot quicker if you know the right people. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I just echo what you said there, Martin. I think in this case, the West Bengal Radio Club works a lot with the authorities and therefore has the contacts. So when some of their members put back this information, it obviously got passed on to the right people in the police force, and the information they supplied was used. And indeed, the brother of the victim who had been attacked was contacted, and things got sorted. And also the police obviously got the pictures of the offenders as well. So it's contacts. And as we've talked about situations in India before, the amateur radio emergency support, or whatever you want to call it, seem to have good, certainly in the West Bengal region, work a lot with the authorities, be it police, ambulance, whatever. And in this case, I think this may well have helped the situation and got a good conclusion, at least for the youngster that was attacked. And hopefully, in the meantime, they've caught some of the attackers. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. As long as Caryn put it, we don't operate in that. They have a term for it called YOTA syndrome, where we don't take the law into our own hands. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. And I don't really know what to say with this news story either. You know, if it hadn't been radio amateurs, it could have been another group of people with doing a different hobby altogether who were equally well connected. So I know it's not an amateur radio news story as such, but even so, yet again, the West Bengal Club has come up trumps, haven't they?
Yes, they certainly have, which is a good one. Dan, last words on this one?
I'm going to do an Edmund on this one. I really have no other comment to make.
Okay, well, I think it was worth mentioning. Certainly, as I say, Caryn educated me on the white ERP syndrome, where people like to sometimes think they're in charge and doing the law enforcement when they're not. I suggest, you can report these things, but leave it to the professionals to do the job if you can. If you're put into a position, you then have to make a decision what you're going to do. But I'm not recommending anything here. So, that concludes our news stories. Let's see what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. And as always on this group, ladies first, Caryn.
Well, thank you, Martin. I have one thing only to report on. Just concluded activating Kilo to Alpha, special event station for one of the original 13 colonies. The very popular annual event celebrating our Independence Day. In the UK, Martin, that would be your election day. But we were marking independence here in the States, such as it is. And it was a challenging week. We did not have the best propagation. We did our best. We got some interesting contacts. I did a combination of sideband and CW, of course. And I got my best DX, surprise, surprise, doing CW. So that was a great thrill for me. It's always an honor to be a part of this team. We've got some great ops. Part of why we do these team events is to connect with other ham radio operators. It's not, at least for me, it's not about getting the big numbers. It's not about getting the big contacts. Yeah, I do like getting the DX, knowing that I can get the DX. But even when I was operating sideband and I said I was in New York, my goodness, how many people from around the country used to live right here in this section of New York? How much fun it is to talk with folks who you may have worked previous year, or to find out that your contact with your station got them the clean sweep. You were number 13 for them. It's nice to bring joy to other folks. Ham radio is responsive in disasters and so many more serious pursuits. And that, I think, is our highest calling, as well it should be. I think we can also bring some happiness to people, have a little fun, build a team. The K2A team of operators was constantly communicating on the Discord channel so we could coordinate our frequencies and our modes, and we have all become friends. Hey, how good is that, right? So the propagation wasn't the best, so what? We really got the job done. So everybody came away, I think, with a smile on their face. That was it for me. I've done no POTA. It's been too hot. Anything I can do in air conditioning, Martin, I will continue to do until the temperatures go back down. So I'll send it back to you.
Yeah. Well, the temperatures haven't been particularly high in the UK, so we got the opposite. And yeah, you're right. Any contact's a good contact, in fairness. So you might not get hundreds if the bands are poor, but getting a contact is fun. Right, Dan, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
Well, as usual, quite a bit. So, since we last spoke, field days have happened here in the U.S., and our club had a real nice field day operation. I managed to reprise my title as the person who made the most contacts. I made 505 contacts over field day. And I managed to actually do a little go-to-station coaching as well. So I was happy to get a lot of new people on HF. So that was a lot of fun. Unlike Caryn, I have been doing a lot of POTA, and I've been making some improvements to my POTA antenna. So one of the features of my antenna was that I was using twisted pair wire as a feed line, and a friend of mine encouraged me to try some 300 ohm twin lead instead, either 300 ohm twin lead or 450 ohm ladder line. And since I happened to have some 300 ohm twin lead, I tried that, and actually that, although I haven't made specific measurements to bolster my theory here, it does seem to work a little bit better than twisted pair feed line. So that's a nice thing. And then along with that, I actually built a 4-to-1 current balun. I had some kits here that I'd gotten somewhere, some Hamfest, somewhere where or another. And my friend wanted to buy a Cobra antenna like the one I have, and he said the guy suggested he get a 4-to-1 balun and a 4-to-1 current balun, and the only one he could find was cost like $100. So I said, well, geez, you could make one for a lot less than that. And I had these little kits already, so I made one. And he still bought the expensive one, but now I have this 4-to-1 current balun that I can use on my POTA antenna. So those are the highlights. So back to you.
Yeah, sounds like you've been enjoying yourself, Dan. And sometimes if you can build stuff, it's not only you save yourself some pennies, but you get a certain amount of satisfaction. You look at it and go, yeah, I built that. That's working because I built it. And I know where you're coming from on that one. Well, I'm going to go to Ed at the next, because I'm leaving Edmund till last, because I think Edmund might be confirming some of the things I've done as well. So, Ed, what have you been up to?
Well, here in Europe, last weekend wasn't field day, it was Ham Radio Friedrichshafen. And so I was down there for 3 days and had a great time. Other things, been working on antennas as always. I actually got some of these really cheap 5.3 meter telescopic antennas out of China, and built myself a couple of different quarter wave verticals with ground plane made of 8 radials, and surprisingly simple little antenna that packs away into a small space but works very well. So that's one of my antenna things. The other thing I've been working on is still the 2-element beam. I took that with me to this morning. This morning I was out really early and from a HEMA summit, and actually a new POTA track, not a park, but a route, a POTA route that goes from one town to another, a nature trail you could call it. Happens to be can be at the same place. So I did a double activation this morning, and using the wire beam there, worked into Australia and around Europe. So, usual sort of things I seem to get to report on in this show. But the other thing I'm pulling my hair out a little bit on at the moment, I've got a problem. I've got a little portable amplifier I built, just a 70 or 80 watt one for portable usage for HF, and it's blowing the MOSFETs. So I'm doing a bit of troubleshooting on that as well, and hopefully I'll get that sorted very soon. Bits of this and bits of that, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, well, it sounds interesting, and I hope you get your PA sorted soon. Otherwise, it's going to be expensive if you keep popping the MOSFETs. But
well, actually not, because the MOSFETs cost about €1 or €2 each.
Oh, well, yeah, but obviously you want to get it done. I thought they'd have been more than that, but at least you probably want to get it done, which is the important thing. Right, Edmund, what have you been up to? Because I think you've been up to quite a bit.
Well, not really. The main thing is that when the previous edition of this podcast was released 2 Sundays ago, I went up onto high ground in West Sussex, a place called Chantry Post, overlooking the village of Storrington, and I took part in the second edition of 433 Alive, which was designed for making contacts just for the fun of it on 70 centimetres FM simplex. And in the first edition, I made 19 contacts. I was hoping for more this time. In the event, I only made, I think it was 12 or 13, something like that. All kinds of reasons why that might have happened. It was a hot day, a lot hotter than it had been at the end of March when the first event happened. Also, later that same evening, the England team were playing in the Euro football's championship. So not as many, but the furthest DX was slightly further away. Last time, the furthest I managed was just north of Heathrow. This time I managed Streatley Hill, which is about 12 miles northwest of Reading. So it was good fun. And even though you don't normally associate aircraft scatter with FM, it did work very well. For some of the contacts I had, I could see the signal strength coming up just as an aeroplane was going over midway between where I was and where the person was who I was talking to. Other than that, I've not done a lot of radio. I'm still hunting the French special event stations leading up to the Paris Olympics, which start on the 26th of July. And at the moment, I'm just 3 QSOs away from getting the gold certificate. So something would have to go pretty badly wrong between now and the 26th of July for me not to manage it. If that's something you're interested in, go on to qrz.com and search for the call sign Tango Mike 00 Juliet Oscar. That's Tango Mike 00 Juliet Oscar. Jeux Olympiques, Olympic Games, and there's a large amount of information on there in French and English and German that explain how you can apply for a certificate if you like that kind of thing. The day that this podcast is released is the day of the McMichael Rally, and on the day that we're recording this, which is the Wednesday the 10th of July, there's a notice gone up on the McMichael Rally Twitter /X/ whatever you want to call it this week page, where they've said that the rugby club where the rally is held have made warning noises about whether the ground will be firm enough for the rally to be able to go ahead, because we've had an awful lot of rain in the south of the UK over the last few months. And yes, latterly we've had a couple of weeks of sunshine and higher temperatures. But now this week we've had yet more heavy rain and quite a lot of it. So we haven't really had summer yet properly, or doesn't feel like we have anyway. So what they've said is that they will make an announcement nearer the time. So if you are listening to this very early on Sunday on the day of release, and if you're planning to go to the McMichael Rally, just double check on Twitter or other social media platforms just to make sure that they haven't cancelled the event relatively late in the day due to the ground where the rally would be taking place being too soft and boggy and wet and that kind of thing. Other than that, the only other thing on the horizon is that Thursday, the 8th of August, is International Cat Day. And I've loved cats ever since I was old enough to understand what a cat was. And ever since the mid-1980s, I've always had a cat by my side, so wouldn't be without them. And I have got a special event license, Golf Bravo 4, Charlie Alpha Tango, or Great Britain for Cat. And I plan to be on the air as much as possible on the day itself, and a little bit on the Friday, and as much as possible over the weekend as well. Most activity will be on 40 metres SSB probably, but I will venture onto the higher bands if they are open. And there are a few other CAT stations around. There's another one from the UK, Golf Bravo 9, Charlie Alpha Tango. The chap operating that, I think, is going to be mostly on CW. And there's a couple of other special event stations on the air elsewhere in Europe. So because CATs are international, I will try to get into that international spirit by speaking as many languages as possible, quite badly probably, some of them, on the air, just for a bit of fun and to have a laugh. So that's what's coming up. There's also an International Dog Day later in the month that Ed might want to say a few words about, but unfortunately, being the pleb that I am, I have never understood the appeal of dogs. I'm really sorry, but I just don't get dogs at all, which is a failing on my part, no doubt. But pussycats, absolutely love them. So listen out for GB4 Cat on the 8th of August through to the following Sunday. And that's it, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, well, you have been busy, so that's good, and you're lining things up for what you're doing. Right, what have I been up to? Well, I was out with you when you did your 433 Alive. I was actually parked in the car next to you, and I did it as a POTA activation, and it's the second time I've activated that same park, so it's not nothing special, but I managed to get some HF contacts in the log, which was quite nice. The other thing was I probably spent equally as much time talking to the general public as I did operating. Now, I know most of you are big operators go, you Philistine, you should be operating. But it's our chance to communicate with the public. So there I am with a drive-on mount with a fishing pole up and a vertical antenna. I can go into greater depth if you want, but vertical antenna. And the people walk up and they look at this thing, they go, whoa. And then somebody says, is that a fishing pole? Yeah. You won't catch anything. I said, I've caught you, haven't I? Giggle. And that opened that one up. But I had a couple of people come up to me and say, I don't mean to be nosy. The thing that broke the conversation instantly when they said, I don't mean to be nosy, I said to them, you're not being nosy, you're being inquisitive, and I like that. And then they asked lots of questions, which was good. So, we do have to be out talking to the public as well as operating, because that's the way we promote our hobby. Now, what else I've been up to? Well, I bought some 45 amp power pole connectors. Why? Well, I decided if I'm going to take out my main rigs, which are in the shack, I've now terminated all my main rigs antennas with BNCs so they can just unclip very quickly. And I've cut the two power leads to my ICOM 7300 and my ICOM 9700, cut them basically in half and fitted power pole connectors to join them together again. And you think, why? Well, what that means is if I want to take the radio out, I can unplug it there and not have to unwire half the shack and struggle getting all the cable out when it's all sort of tied down nicely. And I made myself a extension lead which will plug into either one of my two radios with nice thick cable. So that was that one done. So I was quite pleased about that. I've been playing with the VNA that Frank gave me. I'm beginning to get the results I think I ought to. This is me learning and trying to understand the software, but it's certainly kept me quiet for a few afternoons in between operating on the talk group. Yeah, I've operated on the talk group a few times. Not had that many discussions, but have had a few. Done a bit of 2 meters and 77s from the car, and also a bit of HF. And I've worked a few HF stations. The bands haven't been that good, but occasionally you get somebody on that's quite strong, and they're telling me they're running a kilowatt, and I think the maximum I ran one afternoon was 75 watts. So, you don't have to be running mega amounts of power, but there seems to be some big stations on that are. I've been training, helping train a lady called Claire. This is ongoing. We've been doing some training work. And last week we had a young lady, Catherine, 18 years old, came with her dad to find out what amateur radio is about. Unfortunately, didn't see her this week, but hopefully we left her in amateur radio in good light with them. Don't forget, and for people in the south of England, I'm sorry lots of you don't live in the south of England, but for people who live in the south of England, Sunday the 28th is the Grand Day Out, which is held in Ashford in Kent, and it's a free event. Even if you want to sell there, it's a free event. You can put a table there, you can sell your stuff, you can turn up, you can have a look round, and all the bits and pieces. If you do go, two things the organiser says. One thing the organiser says is that don't bring your tea, coffee, and a sandwich. The rest of the thing is free. Just go and buy it in the canteen there, the cafe there. It's reasonably priced, and that's how they make their money, by us using the cafe there. And they're not overpriced, and they do a good thing. The other thing is, if you want to have a good look round, there's actually a windmill, and they do tours around the windmill. And that's very, very interesting. I did the tour last year, so that's worth a look, in fairness. And I was going to mention it, Michael, but Edmund, you've done it for me. So last I saw is that their website will make an announcement on 2:00 on Friday afternoon before this Sunday coming. So it'll already been in place, and anybody going, if you're listening to this, hopefully you've checked before you've gone. So that's pretty much what I've been up to. So, we've been both busy boys, all of us, haven't we? And that's a good one. So all that's left for me to do now is to thank the guys for turning up, and we'll move on to the next part of the podcast. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik KB6NU.
Well, my pleasure as always, Martin.
Yeah, great to chat to you, Dan, and we'll do it again soon. I'd like to thank Caryn Eve Murray KD2GUT.
Always a good time. Thank you, Martin. Catch you next time.
Yeah, well, it's always good having a chat, isn't it? And I think that's probably the most enjoyable part of these podcasts, is having these chats. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Many thanks for having me on, Martin, and I'm going to the Grand Day Out in Ashford at Willesborough Windmill, so looking forward to it very much.
I thought you was, and it'll be a good one. And last but not least, Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yeah, no worries, Martin. Thanks for inviting us, and we'll talk again in a month's time.
Yeah, we'll do. Okay, then. 73, guys, and we'll move to the next part of the podcast. 73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with positive news here. The ARRL have announced that the Logbook of the World has returned to service, and after being offline due to the recent systems issue that happened there at the ARRL back in May. Work is progressing on updating the system, and I say they've got obviously a backlog of a lot of logs, etc. to work through, but they're testing things and basically keeping things working from there. They're expecting a huge influx of logs, particularly from de-expeditions and contests, so they've asked if you could sort of space out the uploads to not put too much pressure on the systems as they bring them back up and running. They've asked as well for any support issues to be email only rather than to call ARRL headquarters. So that email address is lotw-help@arrl.org. So as I say, it looks like it's going to be a pretty big job to get, as I say, this fully back up and running. They're also looking at some Windows as well for some more planned upgrades and work on the system as well. So they're going to be announcing those nearer the time. So just giving you a heads up there. That could be happening. So good news that Logbook of the World is back up and running, but as I say, will take a bit of a while to get everything, as I say, updated. So as I say, fingers crossed to the guys that are working on that and they get a speedy recovery. The RSGB are supporting British Science Week with a construction challenge. The task is to provide a method of either using the frequency of a radio, frequency source or signal, to provide, either measuring the frequency of a radio frequency source or signal, or providing time reference to a radio operator or radio system. And so you must be able to use readily available components, materials, or other resources. So they've divided this into 3 categories: under 18 or still in school, under 21 or an undergraduate up to the age of 23, and then an open category as well. You can enter either as a group or as an individual, and each category will potentially win a prize of £150, along with kudos of being announced at the RSGB convention in October. Entry to the deadline is the 1st September. So, as I say, if you want to get cracking on this interesting time-related challenge, we'll pop a link to this on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to find out more information. MESAT-1, the amateur radio satellite, is now in orbit. Built by the University of Maine in cooperation with AMSAT, the satellite carries a 30 kilowatt wide VF-UF transponder plus a BPSK telemetry downlink. We'll pop the technical details for this on our webpage, but there's great opportunities for amateurs to use this satellite, and they're being encouraged to do so by the AMSAT team. So if you're a satellite chaser, certainly worth a look for you. Right, now we're going to head over to our feature this episode, which is Ed Durrant DD5LP's report from Friedrichshafen, the Ham Radio 2024 show. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now for this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
With the sounds of the Zeppelin airships flying overhead, I'm once again at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen, on the shores of Lake Constance in southern Germany, and despite what was forecast, we have sunny weather. As usual, the biggest ham gathering in Europe and the 4th largest in the world, with over 10,000 paying attendees from all over the world, took over the world-class facilities of the Neue Messe Expo Centre in Friedrichshafen for 3 days. There are 3 Zeppelin-sized halls holding traders, exhibitors and flea markets, along with a conference centre where multiple streams of presentations take place on Friday and Saturday. For those living in Germany, a new feature at Ham Radio was a job market with representation from several large high-tech companies who were looking to amateur radio to find skilled people to fill important roles in their companies. We are here to see new radio and products related to Ham Radio. Unfortunately, ICOM, Yaesu and JVC Kenwood had nothing new to release at the show. The SOTA Award scheme was well represented with their own stand organised by SOTA Switzerland, along with a dinner on the Friday evening and a forum in the conference centre on Saturday. So let's get to our first interview, and this is with Graham from BHI. I want to know if there's anything new this year or how business is going.
So far so good. Looks like there's a good stream of people coming through the doors. We're doing a 10% discount for the duration of the show up until Monday, so it's quite a nice discount off our products, and that also is on our website. We have a new wireless Bluetooth noise cancelling headphones we've just launched recently, and there a lot of interest in those. I actually used mine on the way back from Dayton Hamvention on the plane, and they lasted quite a long time, so we're hopeful that that will get some interest.
Yeah, I was seeing more and more radios with Bluetooth built in, not just VHF but HF as well. Are these just headphones or a headset?
These are just headphones. mainly more for the commercial side, but if you had a Bluetooth radio on the output, you could actually use them to listen to your radio with them, especially if you're on a contest station where there's a lot of background noise, like the exhibition here. You could literally use them to block out all the noise while you're trying to listen to a weak signal, so they would work well in that situation.
Yeah, the famous BHI noise cancelling capabilities there. Yeah, I wonder, there's a lot of new DSP technology in new radios, but people still seem to be buying the extra because it doesn't quite do everything, and the add-on from BHI in whichever form it comes, especially your speakers, which I've been listening to here just as we were stood here, they make a big difference. And I mean, are you getting more customers worldwide now, or are they mainly European? You said you were over at Dayton, so how's trade from the US hams?
Dayton went really well. We have a distributorship with DX Engineering, Gigaparts, and we just come on board with HRO. So they've got 12 shops. So yeah, worldwide interest is really good. Our technology is unique because it works around speech extraction. So although some of the newer radios have got DSP noise cancelling, I think it's mostly the real experts that are unable to get the best out of that radio. Most people just want a plug and play, so they stick one of our units in the audio path, on goes the switch, noise goes away, and they're happy. So we still got quite a good market.
Is there anything else coming up you can tell us that's in the works, or is it all secret?
Well, we've been working for quite a while on what we call the DSP-KR, which was the little square 10-watt noise cancelling speaker. Some parts went obsolete, but so we're quite close to being able to get that underway and get it into production to add back to the range, because it was quite a popular product.
I mean, I'm hearing that from several people, or we have been in the last few years even, that parts supply after COVID and also parts going obsolete is an ongoing problem for all the manufacturers. Anyway, Graham, I wish you the very best for the future and business here in Friedrichshafen, and I won't block your stall any longer.
Oh no, you're more than welcome, always. You know, the only person I have to vet before he comes is Martin, but don't tell him I said that.
Whoops, he might hear that if he listens to the podcast. I hope he does. Okay, Graham, thank you very much and good luck. After looking at two very impressive radio vehicles, which were on show at the DARC MCOMS and the regulator BNET's A stand, I made my way around to the RSGB stand and found the General Manager, Steve Thomas, and asked him what was happening in the National Society. Okay, I'm here now with Steve Thomas of the RSGB. I managed to grab him between people going to him, just asking him how things are going and how things are going with the RSGB in general, and I'm asking him also what's coming up in the next year that's of importance for the RSGB.
Oh, there's a lot of things coming up in the next year. First of all, it's great to be back here at Friedrichshafen again. It always is. We love meeting everybody that comes past the stand. There's so many people that we need to talk to. It's great. You know, we're standing here next to the tables and chairs that we have out, so we provide tea and coffee for those that come. It's great, but we like having the conversations with people. We're not just here to sell the books. That sometimes brings people into the stand. You've heard this from me before. Yeah. It attracts people to talk to us, but then we have the conversations with them, which is the important part. Membership, absolutely more important to us than selling the books, but it's all a mix, and we love coming here to meet everybody. And we love coming here to meet all the other national societies as well. The international element, very important for us. Because of the work that we do with the IARU and all the other national societies do as well, it's good that we all understand how the other national societies are, what they're doing, and then we all come together with IARU for all of the very important spectrum defence activities and all of those things that we do.
Are there any IARU meetings here at Friedrichshafen this year? I know last year there was, or the year before. But
there always are some. There's the International Societies meeting this afternoon. So the bit of an update, it's not the formal meeting structure, but all the societies get together, so we'll be there for that one this afternoon. And then there's some informal things, there's some in the evening as well. So yeah, there are people meeting, and some of the committees I think are meeting, but nothing. It's not in the formal sort of conference structure.
It's more a person-to-person networking.
Well, there is a lot of that, and also the IARU stand is a bit of a hub for those societies to go. And they're showing innovation work on the IARU stand this year. It's great to see. I think it's DARC are doing a lot of practical activities here as well. I saw people setting up soldering stations and things down there.
That's every year.
Yeah, but it's great to see it. I love seeing that sort of stuff go on. It's brilliant.
Yeah, what I was going to say was the stand this year is in a slightly different place to where it used to be, but it actually puts you next to the other societies a little bit, and I think that's good as well, because you sort of off in a corner previously, which was okay, but I think where you are now, I think it's actually a better location.
Well, we seem to be moving this way up the hall a little bit. Yeah, you're right. We used to be right in the bottom corner. People used to know where to find us, and we had a bit of extra space down there, but we're moving a little bit further this way now. We're up near Ellicraft and ICOM this year, and we experiment with where we go around the hall.
Yeah, well, basically where all the national societies and exhibitors start. So if we look from from the RSGB stall further up the hall, it's all commercial. Yeah. Further back, it's all societies and associations and things. So I think it's a good place to be. And the ARRL's not far away, and the DARC,
they're over there. Yeah. And our stand, of course, is slightly between the two, because we offer a commercial activity because we sell the books, but we're a national society as well. So being on the border between the two is the right place.
How are the preparations going for the UK Hamfest?
Well, National Hamfest will be there as well. We don't organise that, of course, but we have a big presence there. So we'll be there with the bookstall, but with our committees as well. So that's a really good opportunity for people to come and talk to EMC and all of our committees. Those ones, the regional team, a whole load of our teams will be there, and we're just working through that at the moment, how we're going to organise that. But that's happening this year, which is great to see that back. And then straight after that, or a couple of weeks after that, then we have the RSGB convention. I'm right in the middle of planning that. I'm the convention chair for that as well. So that, that's another job. But I love doing that, because the opportunity's there for us to showcase sort of the latest developments in amateur radio and have some of the world's great speakers on amateur radio there talking about it. It's fantastic social activity as well. All of those things mixed together. With AMSAT again this year, so AMSAT are running one of the streams, so they run their colloquium with us at the convention, so they run a stream. We're just working on the other streams that we're putting together, and we've asked people for how would they like to see the convention, and we've had some great responses to that, the sort of things they would like to see, and people offering to come and do things at the convention as well, which is even better, right? So we put this out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we've had a great response to that. So now we've got to build it the way people have asked and what they've suggested. But working with AMSAT is brilliant, because they bring in their colloquium people, and some of those bleed over into the rest of the convention, and vice versa. And one of the things we wanted to do with the convention probably over the last 5 or 6 years is just to make it broad range, so that people can come with a specialism, but they can find out about other specialisms as well. So having that broad range is really important to us, but it's still got to be good for the people who always go to the convention. So you always have the DX community and the contesting community. We've still got to look after those while we include new things. And last year what we did, we actually included a very simple build-a-thon activity. We had Kanga kits there. They were doing a build-a-thon. And everybody said, well, everybody that goes to conventions really experienced. And we said, well, we'll put it there. We'll see how many people do it. But we'll also say that people can see how to run a build-a-thon and then take it back to their own club and things like that. So it wasn't just for it was for the people who were doing it, but they could take it away and do it somewhere else.
Also kind of a train-the-trainer kind of approach.
Sort of. And so we tried it that way, and we're hoping to do more of that sort of thing this year as well.
Okay, Steve.
What we do find, though, is people sometimes think the convention is going to be too complicated for them. But once they come once, they keep coming. It's that first attraction that I think we've got to work on. So if we can get them there, they stay, or they come again.
I wish you luck for that, and of course for the RSGB.
Okay, thanks. Good to see you.
Cheers. There was a buzz around the event this year, with several people sitting for the new Class N entry-level licence, while others were taking the higher-level tests, or even sitting to get a US ham radio licence. BNetSA, the national regulator, always amazes me with their willingness to discuss directly with the hams any licence or regulation problems they had, or indeed to help with application for that new licence or upgrade having just passed the exams. Heading on down to the contesting part of the largest hall, I came across Lee Volante, the organiser of the World Radio Sport Team Championship that will take place in East Anglia in the UK in 2026. And managed to get a few minutes of his time. Okay, still in Friedrichshafen. We're now at the WRTC World Radio Team Sport Championship 2026 UK stand, and I've managed to grab a few minutes with Lee Volante, who is the main organiser of the event. Welcome, Lee, and tell me, how are things going?
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think overall, yeah, the team are very happy with the progress. So we realise that it's a long journey from when we started, so like 12, 18 months now, and 2026 is starting to roll around very quickly. So we're a good proportion of the way through the qualifying period. So we've had lots of support on our email reflector, and we can see that we now have the results of the qualifying contests are starting to appear too, and we're starting to see who are the likely contenders in each of the qualification areas as well. So on the qualification side, that's going well. Obviously, WRTC as a whole, we appreciate, is a very expensive endeavour to put on. So the big thing has been fundraising. So we do want to say a big thanks to everyone that has donated or expressed an interest of support, either online directly with our coin program that we have, those that have visited us at the Dayton Hamvention. There was a great amount of support for us in the US, and here we are now at Friedrichshafen Ham Radio, seeing all of our European friends. So, yeah, all good overall.
Okay, and on the financing side, have you started the sponsorship of tents yet?
Yes, that's been a fairly recent announcement. But so yes, the 10 programme is now continuing. So there's been several 10 spots have been snapped up, but plenty more are still available. And indeed, we just have pledge of support to take one of the European tents just earlier this morning, which was fantastic news. So we're hoping that maybe some of the larger clubs or even groups of friends may like to get together. And we've also noticed that it can be a great way to remember friends that have maybe now silent key, and then we remember them with their name and call sign sponsoring a tent at the event in 2026.
And there are 50 tents, is that right? 50 teams of 2 plus referee in each tent?
Yep, that's right. So it's a number of qualifying teams. So it's very important. We also have a youth presence, so a number of youth teams as well. We've had, some important interest in how those teams will be filled. A couple of sponsored teams as well to help with finances, and a wildcard team is for anyone that qualification that went the extra mile but didn't quite manage to get a qualifying position. Hopefully then we can still award that out.
There's actually a mixture of people who have qualified plus the youth teams and the wild card. Are these actually all going to be, and we say sponsored tents, are they actually going to be tents in fields like they were in 2018, not like in Italy where it was people in bed and breakfast houses and things? We're back to in the middle of a field with identical equipment.
Yes, exactly. Going back to that model, we think that will be the best overall to ensure that we do have the equal playing field, or as equal as we can make it. Originally, when coming up with the idea for bringing WRTC to the UK, we were saying, right, where could we host it? We want a nice, big rural area that's relatively flat, no hills, no valleys. So there were several candidates, but the East Anglia regions, they fitted that bill very well, and also had, relatively good communication links to London and the local airports, or for anyone that may be driving or coming across via the channel. So from that then, we're going to be looking at farmers' fields, maybe even some larger back gardens, field day sites. So we definitely want to, use the best practice from previous WRTC, find electrically quiet sites, maybe have small clusters together, and start to build them up. So our Director of Sites, Andy G4PIQ, so he's now very busy bringing on stage of the programme.
I've got to jump in here and say, by the way, that with Italy things were a bit different. They had to fight not only the COVID, but they also had flooding, they had all kinds of things, so congratulations that they even managed to put that on. But of course, with that being a year late, you ended up with only 3 years to prepare, not 4 years. I guess that's added some stress to the whole thing.
Yes, so we've needed to compress the whole programme. So overall, we're guided by the WRTC Sanctioning Committee, who is formed by members and leaders of all the prior WRTC. So we realise that there's a lot of precedents, a lot of history, so we need to make sure that what WRTC stands for does continue, and we put on a good show in the best spirits of all the prior WRTC and make it, like the Olympic Games of amateur radio.
If I'm not wrong, it's your wife that's taking care of booking the HQ hotel and things related to that. Am I right on that?
It's actually Mark's wife, Mark M0DX's wife, Georgina. She's done a great job, and I guess that's one of the other big things to call out, is that although it's not announced yet, we have secured a headquarters venue, and that was no mean feat in itself, because of course for the competition we want a nice empty rural area with lots of fields. But that's not normally the type of location where you find a huge conference centre with lots of accommodation. But I think, yeah, she's pulled off a miracle. The team are very happy with the choice, and we're sure that all of the entrants, the referees, the visitors and everyone coming along to support WRTC will be happy with the facilities, so we can have a great time, have some great ceremonies, enjoy the food and the drink, and do some great socialising too.
And when will you be able to actually announce where that location is, which town or village or whatever, for people who then plan their travels and their trips around the UK, if they're coming from abroad, maybe to stay somewhere, perhaps not in the HQ hotel, but somewhere nearby? They'll obviously need to know where is the centre of the whole thing.
OK, so I can't quite give that detail away yet. It's going to be one of those coming soon things, but the organising committee, they do have monthly meetings and we're constantly busy on email and WhatsApp, so we're aware of all of the things that need to be coming up soon, and obviously we need to give people enough time to plan their transport, and that was coming into the whole arrangement of, if the event is in July 2026, we need to make sure that all of the entrants are identified, say, about 12 months in advance, and that then affected or then drove what the qualifying contests were and when we needed to get everything ready. So yeah, we'll make sure that it's all announced in good time so people can make their plans.
What about volunteers to support it, putting up masts, driving people around and all that's required? Are you still looking for volunteers, and if so, how do they put their name down?
Absolutely. I think it's impossible to say that, yeah, we can't have enough volunteers. We need hundreds and hundreds of them. We're very pleased with the amount of support that we've had pledged already. To say before that we firmly committed to WRTC, we did check within, the UK radio communities who would be willing to support, and they felt that we had enough support that we could do that. And also from the UK as well, we've had several people pledging us, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. I think we've said that there are a huge variety of jobs, so no one should ever think that there isn't a job that they could do to volunteer. If you'd be happy putting up masts, great. If you'd be happy helping with transportation or logistics or paperwork, could be inside jobs, outside jobs, and there are many things, before the competition weeks as well as the competition week itself. So if you have any free time or an interest, we'll be very happy to hear from you, and the best way to get in contact will be via our website, wrtc2026.org, and we have a contact form on there, and we'll be very happy to hear from you.
And that's a lovely way to finish the interview, I think, Lee. So thank you very much for giving me your time, and good luck with WRTC 2026. And I'm going to be there helping you, as you know, somewhere. Don't know what I'm doing yet, but exactly what you just said, volunteer and there'll be work. So 73 and all the best.
Thanks very much. Take care. Thank you.
After about 5 attempts, I eventually saw a gap in the queue of people waiting at the QRP Lab stand to talk with Hans Summers. So I'm with Hans Summers from QRP Lab at the moment. He's been very busy all morning, so I'm nipping in before his next customers throw me off. Hans, what's happening? QSX, any news, or is that now binned because of QMX with the sideband?
Hi, no. QSX has not been binned at all. It's taken obviously a lot longer than I originally intended. And of course, as you said, QMX Plus does many of the things that QSX was going to do. And so I think when QSX does come, and I certainly have not abandoned it, it's just sort of taking longer, and I've done lots of other things in the interim. Many of these things have got us closer to QSX because they're including developments which I needed to do for QSX anyway. So they're kind of like stepping stones. But I think the final QSX specification will probably be higher than it would have been 2 years ago when it was first planned, to differentiate it. So, maybe a colour display and more things like that. Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of the range, though, is now well known on the market, and I think the QMX has been a very big hit, hasn't it? And you say QMX Plus, what's the difference between the Plus and the original version?
Original QMX, we've sold almost 5,000 in the last 1 year since it was announced. The QMX Plus was launched at Dayton last month and is basically the same firmware and the same design, but in a larger housing. So a QCX Plus style housing, the style housing of the older QCX Plus. It also covers twice as many bands, so it covers all the way from 160 metres to 6 metres. And it's got an optional internal GPS module and an optional, you can put in a CR2032 coin cell battery for the real-time clock. So those are the changes, but the firmware is the same, the function, performance. It just covers the whole of 160 metres to 6 metres. It's easier to build actually as well because the toroids are bigger and more spacious. There's more room for making modifications. about 2/3 the enclosure is empty. So
you say it's a larger case, but it's still not large. It's still something that will go into a big-sized pocket. Well, very suitable for portable usage, of course. So the latest QMX Plus is now available, and you announced it at Dayton. Is it actually in production and orderable, or is it backlog?
No, it's completely orderable. We have them in stock. The kit's in stock. We have something like approximately 300 off the top of my head. We still have in stock from the first batch. If you want to order online from qrplabs.com, the kit will be shipped within normally a day or two, and typically it will take 5 or 6 days to get to you. If you want to order the assembled version, which costs $60 extra, that will go into our queue, which is currently over 800 people waiting and takes about 4 months to get through. So we're making around 200, 250 a month. So assembled ones, there's a bit of a wait, but the kit is...
assembling them will take time, of course, and it's a shame there's such a long queue for the customers, but for you it's a good sign because it means the company's doing well.
That's right, yeah. And it's kind of a buffer as well. So we have 11 employees, and it's very hard to judge exactly how many employees you need when your kit range keeps changing and new things coming out or new band versions. So there was recently a 60 to 15 meter version of the QMX, which was specifically requested by SOTA operators. And when you get these spikes in demand, it's nice to have that waiting list, which can sort of ebb and flow a bit. Because, of course, you can't easily hire people when you have a spike and then fire them when you no longer need them. It's not the way people work, right? So it's nice to have that kind of buffer.
And what about component supply? I mean, we talked to you a couple of years ago, and like everybody else, component supply was becoming a nightmare. Has it calmed down a little now?
It's certainly calmed down a lot. It did not get back yet, in my opinion, to pre-COVID. It's people divided on what the reasons for that were, but it did coincide precisely, right? And so it did not get back, in my opinion, to the previous levels. We do still have issues. I've been able to weather those issues quite well because I had been quite nimble about changing the design when I needed to or changing the components. A lot of manufacturers won't do that. They get stuck on a certain exact bill of materials and they will not change that. But I've tried to be quite nimble with that. The latest batch of QMX and QMX Plus, the LM4562 op-amp was unavailable, so we changed to the LT6231, which is actually gives an 8 dB sensitivity improvement. So it's an upgrade. And
I see. With being a smaller company, with the designer being the owner, so to speak, you can do that kind of thing. Whereas a larger corporate company, they've got a design, they'll build it, and if they run out of parts, they have to wait for the parts to become available, if they do. So, nimble is good.
Being small is good in that way, because you can be nimble. Being very big is good that you've got economies of scale, you can have big stocks, you've got, a whole big corporate weight behind you, which I don't have. So there is advantages both ways, but certainly it's been very interesting to me always that small companies can compete with big companies because the small company can be that much more innovative and nimble around things,
Bit out of the ballpark question here. Do you ever have time for any hobby or any other pastime apart from all this work? I mean, do you actually do anything else apart from build radios?
I mean, other than build radios and the family stuff, not really. I mean, I've had maybe one QSO this year. Yeah. And so this is my hobby and it became my business, but now I don't have a hobby anymore. So it's a bit tragic, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will respect you for that because you are actually very renowned as a good designer and a supporter of amateur radio. It'd be nice to hear you on the bands a bit more, though.
I was going for a period about a year ago where I used to get up an hour early in the morning before sunrise and I'd spend an hour on 40 meter CW and having fun and practicing my CW, but somehow I stopped that and now I get up an hour earlier and just do emails for an hour.
I know,
but it'd be nice.
I know how that is. Thank you very much, Hans. I really appreciate you. And the queue's already waiting behind me, so I'll move over and let the rest of the people get to you. Thanks a lot, and 73.
Thank you, 73. See you soon.
Friedrichshafen wouldn't be Friedrichshafen without the food and drinks. As well as the large beer garden serving traditional pork and chicken dishes and serving the best beer in the world, with or without alcohol, inside were also a canteen for a variety of snacks and meals and, my favourite, several ice cream and cake stalls. Coffee and soft drinks were available everywhere, of course. On my way back through the halls, I saw an opportunity of a follow-up to last year's round table with the RSGB. So I got in quick to see what is happening in the complex spectrum licensing area. Okay, I'm back with the RSGB, this time for some specialised subjects that we discussed last year at Friedrichshafen as well, so we can get some updates on spectrum management, what's happened since last year. And I've got with me John McCulloch, GI4BWM, still using the I, are we? Yes, good. And of course Stuart Bryant, G3YSX, and Murray Nyman, G6JYP. So I'll probably start and go to Murray first and ask what's been happening in spectrum management. Is there anything new coming up? Are you already preparing for the next WRC, etc., etc.? Over to Murray.
Right, so the broader sort of term actually is spectrum and licensing, because you get your spectrum and then it gets licensed out to users. And of course, exactly at this time last year was when Ofcom released its licensing consultation. And 1 year on, the dust is largely settled, but we've still got a couple of phases to go. So that opened up a very busy year for us last year, both on the licensing review, which had all sorts of involvement, and a lot of outreach as well to try and get amateurs to realise that. And I'd still appreciate more amateurs actually reading their new conditions. But as the year wore on, of course, we went into the first International Amateur Radio Union Conference, and then the World Radio Conference at the end, where although 23 centimetres was our highest priority, there was items across HF, VHF and beyond. And whilst that finished in December, we're already starting on the prep for 2027 and 2031. Unusually, you agreed the topics for the next conference, but they were so overwhelmed, they've got all the preliminary set for another generation's worth as well. So we're enjoying a lull in proceedings, but we'll be back in battle soon.
Right, so they're keeping you out of mischief, that's true. Murray also gave me some help on the operating manual that's be coming out later on this year, which also there's some clarification in there about the licence changes, so please read that, everybody. Okay, and now we'll move around to Stuart. And what can Stuart tell us about what's been happening?
Well, our big focus is on the strategy still, and it will continue to be our focus for quite some time because it's of such fundamental importance to the society. Probably the most advanced of the subtopics is outreach, and we have a team that are focused on that. And we're trying to work out what is the best way to deliver practical outreach out into the community. We are also trying to work out how to engage with professional groups, because professional organisations find that there's a shortage of engineers who understand how to do things. And so there are opportunities there, and we're trying to work out the best way to explore them.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in there, Stuart, and say you've seen also here the link between amateur radio and professional industry. There's actually a job market at Friedrichshafen this year. So there needs to be more links between industry and amateur radio, I think.
I completely agree. A couple of us have got some ideas, but it's too early to really to say. But a couple of us that have got some ideas about how we might start to do that. And, of course, one of the big messages we got from Ofcom, a public message from Ofcom, is that they're looking to the amateur radio community to generate more engineers, in particular spectrum engineers, where it's very hard to find suitably qualified people.
I hope we've left something for John to say. Here we go, on to John.
Thank you, Ed. Back to spectrum matters, really. One of the things that happened with the new licence and the change in conditions was that you no longer need a notice of variation to operate a repeater. So below 5 watts, you don't need anything really, other than to coordinate the frequency and make sure that you're not going to interfere with anyone. And we offer a service, the RSGB offers a service through their ETCC website, where you can actually go in, coordinate your frequency and receive a certificate to say you are coordinated. Above 5 watts, between 5 and 25 watts, you still need authorization to operate, and that authorization is by a call sign, again, which is authorized. We manage, the RSGB manage those call signs, so we issue them provided we're happy that coordination has been done, meet all the parameters, they're not going to interfere with anyone else and all the rest of it. Above 25 watts, you're back into NOV territory, so we have to go back to Ofcom with that, but again, we'll process those to Ofcom. So it's provided a big opportunity and also a lot of work for us in organising the frequency assignments, but everyone has cooperated very well, and I think the system is working well. It's not just repeaters, of course, it also applies to gateways and to data stations, as we're calling them. which sweeps up many of the innovative things that are coming along. There's spread spectrum techniques and all sorts of things happening, LoRa, so we're discussing those all at the moment. There's a whole lot of things happening. There's some new equipment coming from where else other than China, which does spread spectrum in UHF, so we're just waiting to see what the impact of that is whenever it arrives on our shores.
Thanks, John. And just to throw another comment in there, that the licensing of repeaters is actually something that in Australia they're trying to work out how to do with their changes in the licensing as well. So you may be getting contact from the WIA to ask you what the RSGB does before long. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that. I really appreciate you all making the time for us. And as always, wish you all the best. And the RSGB website is the place to go if you want to find any information on all this. It's all linked down in the various links from there. And otherwise, the RSGB will be at the National Hamfest, of course. So if you've got any questions on any of these subjects, all of these people here will be there, I believe, and therefore willing to answer questions and also to accept new volunteers for roles. If you want to help, if you want to give back to the industry, the RSGB would love to have you as a volunteer. Thank you, gentlemen. As well as the SOTA forum on the Saturday, I also attended the IOTA forum. IOTA was the very original on-the-air award scheme and is celebrating 60 years of operation. And indeed, this celebration was the theme of Ham Radio Friedrichshafen 2024. Generally, it feels like Friedrichshafen is back to normal and people are forgetting the bad COVID years. The event is already set for June 27th to 29th in 2025. See you there. For ICQ Podcast, this was Ed Durrant DD5LP.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, many thanks there to our friend and colleague Ed Durrant DD5LP for his report there on the Ham Radio show in Friedrichshafen, Germany. And really appreciate you doing it, Ed, and giving us a wonderful feel for that show. I suppose one of the disadvantages, Dad, is we were in Dayton, Ohio this year, which unfortunately meant the fact that getting across to Friedrichshafen was just a step too far in terms of finances and holiday. But we're hoping to try and get back to Friedrichshafen next year and, as I say, enjoy all the fun in Europe. So, as I say, it'll be on our planning list for next year, and really jealous of you, Ed, that you got to do that show. As I say, I'm really, we appreciate you sending us, the flavour of what you saw at that show. Right, well, we have a couple of bits of feedback this episode, and many ways you can get in contact with us is obviously through the Contact Us page on the ICQ Podcast website, but we also try our best to keep an eye on the social medias and all the other places we publish the ICQ Podcast show for you. So we spotted some feedback on our YouTube channel, and we just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention and some ideas and thoughts there. So on our last show, we were talking about the issue of AM radio in cars, and Glenn Jenkins dropped a note on the YouTube page to say that he believes that the car issue is very focused on electric vehicles due to the DC to three-phase AC interference on the vehicles from there. So I know that we were just talking about that before we recorded there. You're looking for potentially for a bit of more information. If Glenn's got it, you can drop it to us at info@icqpodcast.com, because you're quite intrigued of how that might be the case.
Yeah, certainly am, Colin. And Glenn, we always listen. It's worth listening. I'm driving with Mrs. B a 2020 Toyota Corolla. So it's 4 years old. It has AM radio in it. It's a hybrid, but the only difference between a hybrid and electric, in my opinion, because it's electric drive, is I've got a generator under the bonnet that tops the battery up rather than plug it into a charging point every so often. Now, the fact that generator, if it's generating electricity, that will be even more chance of it causing interference, but it doesn't. Now, I know Chris Howard's got a BMW that I believe is hybrid. No problems at all with his. So I've listened to AM radio, I actually had it on for about 2 hours the other day, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing things. And I had a 2-hour drive, had it on. I had no interference at all. So that's where I'm going, Glenn. You've brought up an interesting suggestion, but I still think the car manufacturers are trying to frighten people into saying, if we give you AM radio, we can't give you all the safety features. And that's where I came with the fear, uncertainty and doubt, FUD theory. So, interesting point, Glenn, and I'm willing to be educated. Back to you, Colin.
Yes, as I say, if you've got any info on that one, please drop it to us at info@icqpodcast.com. We'd love to have a look at it. And say, as Dad says there, we're here to be educated and generate thoughts. So, it'd be a great opportunity to have a look at that data. Episode 433 spoke about antennas and, as I say, planning laws, etc. on antennas. And Andy 2E0 Romeo Echo suggests that if you need to find out about how long an antenna has been erected for, Google Earth could be your option for you. This is because they do keep historical pictures of what they take, and you can obviously use the timeline to go back to see if you can actually see the installation on the antenna for now. And of course, he also reminds everybody that wire antennas don't need planning permission. So say that's obviously certainly a consideration to take on board if you're in an area where, say, your antenna erection could cause issues with planning regulations or neighbours, etc. So nice little tip that about Google Earth. I've got to be honest, it's one of those features, that history feature, which I do forget about from time to time and then stumble across it when doing something else and then end up going down a rabbit hole, spending loads of time looking at old photographs or old old changing signs of places along the way. So I would suggest be aware that you could end up going down a rabbit hole looking for an antenna and then find out you're doing all sorts of research.
Yeah, certainly, Colin. And Andy's right. Wire antennas won't actually show up particularly on Google Earth. Probably verticals wouldn't. Not actually done it, but they probably wouldn't. I think the thing is, if you had a massive tower with a big Yagi on the top, it'll stand out like a sore thumb. And that will stand out and upset everybody. I think, in fairness, is if you've got friendly neighbours you talk to and you put up an antenna, they're not going to crib too much. So you might put your antenna up and thank you very much. This is just the England coming into line with the rest of the UK, this new ruling. But in fairness, it's one of those things. The other thing is, and I've seen people do this, and it's probably a little bit naughty, if you've got a mobile antenna, and I've seen people put a mast on a trailer and pump the mast up when they want to use it and lower it when they don't, that's actually a mobile one, so it's not a fixture. I'm not suggesting you do it, but that's another way around it as well. So back to you, Colin.
Yeah, you've got to love the creativity of ideas, haven't you? So, some thoughts there, and many thanks there for Glenn and Andy for their feedback. I really do appreciate that there from their feedback. Right, well, as always, we'd like to thank the donors this episode, the monthly subscription donors. Really do appreciate that support you kindly give us. Just remember that July is our birthday month, so there's a special birthday donation on the ICQ podcast donation page. Please consider us and, as I say, send some value our way. As we always say, this show can only continue advert-free, being independent and giving you honest opinions because we don't take advertising, and it's your support that keeps us paying our way. So we really would appreciate you consider us by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. Thanks again to Ed Durrant DD5LP for his very kind feature work there at Friedrichshafen. Very appreciate that, Ed. And Ed, along with Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, Caryn KD2 Golf Uniform Tango, and Dan KB6 November Uniform for taking part in the News Roundtable. We do appreciate, guys, you helping us out there. Right, well, that's an important time of our work in progress here, Dad, as I go through the list of things we're supposed to do and tell people about, where the most important thing I have to tell you about is about making Mrs. B a cup of tea and find her, hopefully, a little treat in the cupboard.
Yeah, certainly will, Colin. No problems at all on that one. We'll find Mrs. B a nice treat and we'll have a good cup of tea in a minute. But the interesting one from my point of view, Colin, 16 years. 16 years we've been doing this. It doesn't seem like 16 years. I know I only signed up for 10, and the boys keep telling me if I got 10 right, then I'll be let off. But he said, you haven't got them right yet, Martin, so just carry on trying. But no, in jesting aside, 16 years is a long time. And I think we're enjoying ourselves. And I'm now off to make Mrs. B that cup of tea.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to keep enjoying producing your show for you. And as I say, more importantly, making Mrs. B a cup of tea. So she allows us that time to continue to make the show for you. And we're going to play some radio. And more importantly, catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73's all.
Yeah, 73.